At 6:18 in this morning, Eleanor Morrison had one cracker left, one shoe with a split sole, and one living creature in the world still willing to sit beside her. A stray dog with a torn collar the color of old denim. She broke the cracker in half, stared at the smaller piece in her palm, then gave the bigger half to him. Less than an hour later, almost 40 motorcycles would shake the ground behind that gas station. Men with weathered hands would stand in silence for her. A son would be confronted in front of strangers. And an old woman everyone thought was too weak to fight would decide whether dignity was something you carried or something you demanded back. But none of that had happened yet. At that moment, nobody was coming. And that is the part people forget. Before the engines, before the leather vests, before the corridor of honor, there was only Eleanor Morrison sitting behind a trash bin, trying not to cry where customers could see her. The gas station was called Route 29 Fuel and Food, though there was nothing about it that deserved the word food. It sat on the edge of McLean County, Oklahoma, where the highway bent toward the Arbuckle Mountains, and truckers stopped only because the next clean restroom was 38 miles away. The sign above the pumps flickered even in daylight. The ice machine coughed every few minutes. A faded poster in the window still advertised a breakfast sandwich they had stopped selling 2 summers ago. Behind the building where the asphalt cracked into weeds and cigarette butts collected in the rain gutter, Eleanor had made herself as small as she could. She was 78, though hunger had made her look older. Her gray hair had come loose from the pins she still tried to use every morning. Her coat was thin for late October. Brown wool rubbed shiny at the elbows, one button missing. The collar folded carefully as if neatness could protect the last of her dignity. Her hands trembled in the small, humiliating way hands tremble when the body has run out of fuel and keeps asking politely for more. She sat with her back against the cinder block wall, knees drawn and purse clutched to her stomach. The purse was nearly empty. A paper napkin, a pharmacy receipt, a photograph of a man in a diner apron. She had checked the receipt 6 times since sunrise, as if it might become money if she stared long enough. The dog sat 2 feet away watching her. He was brown and white, lean in the ribs with one ear folded wrong. The old collar around his neck had no tag, only a broken metal loop where one had been. Eleanor had named him Scout because names mattered. Even when nobody used yours anymore, you could still give one away. "Don't look at me like that," she whispered. Scout tilted his head. "I know it's not breakfast. It's barely the memory of breakfast." She held out the larger half of the cracker. The dog sniffed it, then looked back at her face as if even he understood the unfairness of taking food from a woman who looked like she might blow away in a strong wind. "Go on," Eleanor said. "I already had my share." That was not true. Her share was the smaller half, still pinched between 2 fingers, and even that she did not eat right away. She pressed it to her lips first and closed her eyes. For half a second, it was toast from her kitchen. Butter melting into the corner's coffee in a chipped mug, her husband Frank humming badly by the stove, turning bacon too early because patience had never been his gift. Then the smell changed, not bacon, diesel, old grease, trash water leaking from the dumpster. Eleanor opened her eyes. Scout had taken the cracker, but he did not run. He lay down beside her and chewed slowly like he was making it last for both of them. The back door of the station slammed open. Eleanor flinched before she could stop herself. A man stepped out carrying 2 black trash bags. Vernon, the morning manager. Late 50s red face belt digging into his stomach, name tag crooked on a polo shirt that had once been green. He saw Eleanor and stopped like she was a spill nobody had cleaned up yet. "Ma'am," he said, there was no respect in it. "We talked about this." Eleanor pushed herself straighter against the wall. The movement cost her more than she wanted him to see. "I'm not bothering anyone. You're behind my store. I'm behind the store because you told me not to sit near the pumps." That was before customers started asking questions. Eleanor nodded as if he had made a reasonable point. She had been doing that for years, nodding when people spoke to her like she was a problem, smiling when clerks sighed. apologizing to nurses, cashiers, drivers, even doors that closed too fast. "I'll move in a minute," she said. "You said that yesterday." "I know. And the day before." Her eyes went to her lap. Scout stood. The dog did not bark. He only placed himself between Eleanor and Vernon ribs, showing head low. A thin growl caught deep in his chest. Eleanor reached for him. "No, sweetheart. We don't bite people just because they forgot how to be kind." Vernon heard it. His jaw shifted. "Look, I'm not heartless." That was usually what people said, right before proving they were. "But I run a business. I can't have—" He glanced at her coat, her shoes, her purse. "I can't have this back here." "This, not her, this." Eleanor folded the receipt and tucked it back into her purse. "I'll be gone soon." "Where are you going?" She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Because that was the question, wasn't it? Where was she going? For 3 days, she had been telling herself she was waiting. Waiting for Dalton. Waiting for the white SUV to pull back behind the gas station with an embarrassed apology and a paper cup of coffee. Waiting for her son to step out, rubbing his forehead the way he did when life became inconvenient, and say, "Mom, I'm sorry." Things got complicated. But 3 mornings had come, 3 nights had passed, and the SUV had not returned. "They'll come," Eleanor said. Vernon frowned. "Who, my family?" He looked toward the empty service road, then back at her. "Your family left you behind a gas station." Eleanor's face changed. Not anger. Anger would have been easier to watch. It was something smaller and worse. Shame. The kind that makes an innocent person feel guilty for what someone else did to them. "They didn't leave me," she said carefully. "They had to run an errand." For 3 days, Eleanor gripped the purse harder. Vernon exhaled, tired of being close enough to another person's suffering that he might be expected to do something about it. "Did you call somebody?" "My phone was in the car. Money, my son, was holding my card for safekeeping." "ID." She did not answer. He understood anyway. Behind them, a truck hissed at pump 4. Inside the building, the bell over the front door chimed. A customer laughed near the coffee counter. Life kept moving 10 yards away. That was what hurt most. Not the hunger, not the cold concrete, not the stink of spoiled milk leaking from the dumpster. It was the fact that the world had not stopped. People still bought lottery tickets, still complained about gas prices, still tapped phones against card readers, and walked away with warm cups in their hands. They passed the corner of the building and never knew Eleanor Morrison was sitting just out of sight, folding herself smaller and smaller so nobody would have to feel uncomfortable. Vernon threw the bags into the dumpster. One split against the metal lip, spilling paper cups and ketchup packets onto the ground. Eleanor's eyes flickered to the packets before she could stop them. Vernon saw. His expression tightened. "Don't go digging in that." "I wasn't. I mean it. Health code." Eleanor nodded. "Yeah, of course." He stared another second, then lowered his voice. "There's a shelter in Duncan. That's 26 miles. Maybe someone can give you a ride." Eleanor looked toward the highway. Cars rushed past in both directions, bright and untouchable. "Maybe," she said, but they both knew what maybe meant. Vernon reached for the back door. Then he paused, noticing the photograph that had slipped halfway out of Eleanor's purse. It showed Eleanor younger, standing beside a tall man with kind eyes in front of a small roadside diner. The sign over the door read, "Morrison's Haven." Eleanor wore a blue apron, one hand on her husband's shoulder. Behind them, lined across the gravel lot, were motorcycles. Dozens of them. Vernon squinted. "You know bikers?" Eleanor tucked the photo away. "A long time ago." "Huh," he gave a humorless little laugh. "Maybe call them." She tried to smile. "I don't think they'd remember me." Vernon went inside. The door shut. The lock clicked. That sound stayed in the air. Eleanor sat very still. Scout placed his head on her knee. It was such a gentle thing that she almost broke. She put one hand on the dirty fur between his ears. "I had a kitchen once," she told him. "A real one. Big coffee urn by the register. Pie case near the window. Frank used to say I fed people like I was trying to apologize for the whole world. Scout blinked. I suppose that sounds foolish now. Her stomach cramped. She leaned forward, pressing one hand against it until the pain passed. When she looked up, the sun had climbed just high enough to hit the metal edge of the dumpster, turning rust briefly gold. For a moment, Eleanor imagined the diner alive, the bell above the door ringing, coffee pouring, men in leather vests ducking under the frame because they were too tall, too loud, too rough around the edges. Young riders with bruised knuckles and empty eyes sitting at her counter at midnight pretending they only came for meatloaf, when really they came because Eleanor remembered how they took their coffee. No one called her Mrs. Morrison there. They called her Mama Ellie. She had not heard that name in years. A sound rolled across the morning. Low, distant. Eleanor lifted her head. At first it was so faint, she thought it might be a truck crossing the bridge. Then it faded and she lowered her eyes again. Scout heard it too. His ears rose. The sound came back. Not loud yet, not close, more like a vibration under the road than a noise in the air. A deep, uneven rumble moving through the cinder block wall and into Eleanor's shoulder blades. She turned toward the service road. Nothing. Just heat shimmer above asphalt, weeds bending along the fence, the blank rear wall of the gas station and the pale strip of highway beyond it. But the vibration grew, slowly, like thunder deciding whether to become a storm. Eleanor's fingers tightened in Scout's fur. The dog stood. Around the corner, near the pumps, someone shouted, "What is that?" Another voice answered, "Sounds like bikes." Eleanor stopped breathing, not because she understood, because somewhere deep in her memory, beneath hunger and fear and shame, something old recognized that sound before her mind did. Engines, more than one, many. The first black shape appeared at the far end of the road, small against the morning glare. Then another beside it. Then another. Eleanor pressed one hand against the wall and tried to stand, but her knees failed. Scout stepped forward and barked once. The rumble swelled until loose cans near the dumpster began to tremble. And Eleanor Morrison, forgotten behind a gas station with cracker crumbs on her coat, watched the highway fill with shadows. The first motorcycle turned off the highway so slowly it looked almost careful. Not the way people imagine bikers arriving. No wild skid, no shouting, no engine revved for attention. Just a black Harley rolling past the diesel pump, its chrome catching the morning sun, its rider heavy in the saddle like a man who had carried too many years and learned not to waste movement. Eleanor watched from behind the station, one hand on the wall, the other on Scout's head. The rider wore a faded leather vest over a black thermal shirt. His beard was gray at the chin, his arms thick, his face lined by sun and road dust. Across the back of his vest, visible only for a second as he angled toward the side lot, was a patch Eleanor could not fully read. A winged skull, two crossed wrenches, and words curved across the top. Steel Brotherhood. Her stomach tightened. The name landed somewhere deep, not memory exactly, more like a match struck in a room she had kept locked for years. 2 more motorcycles followed, then 4, then 8. They parked in a clean row along the far edge of the lot where cracked asphalt dipped toward weeds. The riders did not look like people who had stopped by accident. They moved with the quiet coordination of men and women who had ridden together long enough to understand each other without words. Customers at the pumps turned to stare. A man filling a work van stopped with the nozzle still in his hand. Inside, the store faces appeared near the front window. Vernon came out from behind the counter so fast the bell over the door slapped glass twice. "Great," he muttered. "That's all I need." The first rider killed his engine. The sudden silence was almost worse than the rumble. He stayed seated a moment, looking across the station. His eyes moved over the pumps, the store, the dumpsters, the bent fence, the loose trash twitching in the wind. Then they stopped on Scout. The dog stood between him and Eleanor, too thin to be intimidating, but trying anyway. The rider took off his gloves. He did not smile. He did not frown. He watched the dog, then the crumbs on Eleanor's coat, Then the way she kept one hand braced against the wall because standing without support had become a negotiation. He swung one leg over the bike and stood. He was not huge in a cartoon way, but when he walked, space seemed to make room. Vernon intercepted him before he reached the back corner. Morning, Vernon said, using the voice he kept for customers he did not want, but still needed money from. You boys passing through the rider looked at him. Maybe. Pumps are open. Coffee inside. I'm not looking for coffee. Vernon glanced toward Eleanor, then back. Look, if this is about her, I already told her that she can't stay. I've been more than fair. The rider's eyes did not leave Vernon's face. What's your name, Vernon? Manager. Vernon, the rider repeated like he was filing it away. How long has she been sitting back there? Vernon shifted. I don't know. Couple days, maybe. She comes and goes? Eleanor lowered her eyes. She did not come and go. She had nowhere to go. But she said nothing because people like Vernon got more comfortable when the people they dismissed stayed quiet. The rider looked past him. Ma'am, he called gently. You all right, that word. Ma'am, not grandma, not old lady, not problem. Ma'am. Eleanor's throat tightened so quickly she could not answer. Vernon let out a short laugh. She's fine, she's just confused. Scout growled again. The rider's eyes dropped to the dog. What's his name? Eleanor swallowed. Scout. Scout yours, no. She stroked the dog's neck. I suppose we're both between families. Something flickered across the rider's face. Not pity, recognition. He stepped around Vernon, giving Scout enough distance not to make the dog choose violence. Behind him, the other riders had dismounted, but none came closer. They stayed near their bikes, watching. The rider stopped 6 feet from Eleanor and lowered himself into a crouch. That mattered. He did not stand over her. He brought himself down until she did not have to look up so far. My name's Cole Jensen, he said. Road name's Hawk. I ride with the Steel Brotherhood. Eleanor gave a tiny nod. That's a fine name. Hawk's not the one my mother gave me. No, Eleanor said softly. Names like that usually come from surviving something. For the first time, his mouth almost smiled. Yes, ma'am. The words ma'am hit her harder than she expected. She looked away. Hawk saw the way her fingers trembled against the purse, the way she had tried to smooth her hair before he reached her as if hunger was acceptable, but being seen messy was unbearable. He saw the split sole on her shoe, the pharmacy receipt peeking from the purse, the cracker crumbs, and he saw Scout licking the last dust of food from the concrete. What did you feed him? Hawk asked. Eleanor looked confused. Pardon the dog. What did you give him? Oh. She glanced at Scout, embarrassed to have been caught doing something private. Just a cracker. You had more, no? Hawk looked at her hand. The smaller half of the cracker was still there, softening from the damp in her palm. He stared at it. Then he turned his head toward the other riders. A woman with short auburn hair and a burgundy bandana tied around her wrist was already moving. She opened a saddlebag, pulled out a wrapped breakfast sandwich and a bottle of water, and started toward them. Eleanor shook her head. No, please. I didn't ask for anything. I know, Hawk said. That's not why I know. The woman approached slowly. May I? Eleanor blinked. May you what? Sit with you. Eleanor did not understand at first. People had asked her to move, asked her what she was doing there, asked if she had money, asked why she smells like rain and asphalt. No one had asked permission to sit beside her. The woman lowered herself onto the concrete a few feet away and placed the sandwich between them, still wrapped. My name's Vera. Eleanor. Nice to meet you, Eleanor. Eleanor stared at the sandwich. Her body wanted it so badly it frightened her. The smell of egg and melted cheese made her stomach twist with pain. But pride is stubborn in people who have lost almost everything else. She folded her hands in her lap and forced herself not to reach. Vera unwrapped the sandwich, broke it in half, handed one half to Hawk, then held the other toward Eleanor. Help us finish this. I hate eating alone. It was a beautiful lie. Eleanor knew it. That made it harder. Her eyes filled. "Thank you," she whispered. She took the sandwich with both hands, not because it was heavy, because she did not trust her fingers. Scout sat in front of her watching. Eleanor broke off a small piece of bread. Hawk's voice came low. "You eat first." She froze. The words were not harsh, but they carried the weight of an order from a man used to being obeyed. Eleanor looked at Scout. Scout looked back. "You hear him," she whispered to the dog. "Apparently we've been overruled." She took one bite. The moment she swallowed, her face changed. Not happiness, not relief. Something almost painful, like her body remembered it was supposed to be cared for and did not know what to do with that information. Vera unscrewed the water bottle and placed it within reach. Vernon stood near the back door, arms crossed, watching the scene become something he could no longer control. "Listen," he said louder now. "I don't want trouble here." Hawk did not turn. "Then don't make any." One younger rider coughed, hiding a laugh. Vernon's face reddened. "This is private property." Hawk stood. When he rose, the whole atmosphere shifted. Not threatening exactly, but Vernon took half a step back anyway. "This woman's been starving behind your building for 3 days, Hawk said. "You got hot food 30 feet away. I offered to call a shelter." "Did you call?" Vernon's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Hawk waited. That silence did more damage than shouting would have. Eleanor pulled the sandwich closer to her chest. "Please," she said, "don't argue because of me." Hawk looked down at her and his face softened. "We're not arguing because of you, Mama. We're arguing because everybody else walked past you." The words settled over the cracked asphalt. Even the riders behind him went still. Eleanor lowered her eyes to her purse. "I don't want to be a burden." Hawk crouched again. "Who taught you that?" That was the first question that hurt. Not because it was cruel, because it went straight to the place Eleanor had been trying to protect. She worked one thumb along the clasp of her purse. "My son is under a lot of pressure." Hawk said nothing. "He has a family, a job, bills. His wife never really—" She stopped. "Well, it isn't easy when a parent gets old," No Hawk said. "It isn't. He said he was helping me with things. My card, my appointments, the house papers." Her voice thinned. "He said I was forgetting things." "Were you?" Eleanor looked up sharply. There it was. The fear. Not of Hawk. Of the question. She had been asked that before. By doctors, bank clerks, her daughter-in-law with a sweet voice and cold eyes. "Are you sure, Eleanor? Maybe you're confused. Maybe you misplaced it. Maybe you signed it and forgot." "I forget little things," she said. "Names of actors, why I walked into a room, whether I added salt." She looked toward the highway. "I did not forget my own son driving away." Vera stopped moving. Hawk's eyes sharpened. "When Tuesday night?" "Here," she nodded. Behind the station, another nod. Hawk glanced toward the corner of the building, then at Vernon. Vernon looked uncomfortable now. "I don't know anything about that." "What time?" Hawk asked Eleanor. She closed her eyes. For 3 days, people had acted like her mind was a broken drawer full of things that could no longer be trusted. So she pulled the memory out carefully. "It was raining," she said. "Not hard, just enough that the pavement looked black. Clarissa was angry because I got mud on the floor mat. Dalton said he needed coffee. He told me to wait near the back because it would be easier to pull around." Her breathing changed. Scout placed his chin against her knee. "I asked for my purse. He gave it back, but it was lighter. I didn't understand until later. My phone was gone. My wallet, my Medicare card, my address book." Hawk's jaw flexed. "He left you with nothing." Eleanor shook her head. "No, not nothing." She opened the purse and removed the old photograph. Her fingers lingered on the man in the diner apron. "He left me Frank." Hawk took the photograph only when she offered it. He looked at the diner, the motorcycles, the woman in the blue apron. Something in him went very still. "Eleanor," he said carefully, "what was your husband's name?" "Frank Morrison. In this place, Morrison's Haven." Behind Hawk, one of the older riders lifted his head. Another stepped closer. Hawk kept looking at the photograph. There were maybe 30 bikers in the picture, most much younger, some barely men, all gathered outside that little diner with the easy roughness of people who had found somewhere they were allowed to belong. On the left side, half hidden behind Frank's shoulder, a young rider raised a coffee mug toward the camera. Hawk knew that face, not from life, from a framed picture on the wall of the Steel Brotherhood clubhouse. A founder, dead 12 years. A man everyone called Preacher because he could talk a furious man out of a fight and a broken man out of giving up. Hawk pointed. You knew him. Eleanor leaned forward. Oh, she whispered. That's Daniel. Always ordered black coffee and peach pie, even when we didn't have peach pie. Frank would say, we're not magicians, son. And Daniel would say, then why do I always leave healed? The older rider behind Hawk removed his sunglasses. His voice came rough. You fed Preacher. Eleanor looked at him. I fed anyone who came hungry. The older rider stared at her like he was seeing a ghost. What did they call you? Eleanor's eyes dropped. That was a long time ago. What did they call you? Hawk asked. She touched the photograph with one trembling finger. Mama Ellie. The name moved through the riders like a spark through dry grass. One man whispered, no way. Another said Preacher talked about her. Vera covered her mouth. Hawk looked at Eleanor, at the dirty coat, the split shoe, the sandwich she was eating politely in tiny bites. His face hardened. Mama Ellie, he said softly. Eleanor tried to smile. I'm afraid I'm not much of her anymore. Hawk stood and pulled out his phone. He walked a few steps away, turned his back to the station and made a call. The riders behind him watched. Eleanor could hear only pieces. Yeah, it's me. A pause. No, this isn't club business. Another pause. It's family. The older rider near the pumps took off his hat and held it against his chest. Hawk looked back at Eleanor. I found Mama Ellie, he said into the phone. Behind Route 29, fuel and food, starving. The person on the other end said something. Hawk's eyes closed briefly. Then he said, bring everyone. Eleanor's breath caught. He ended the call. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then far out on the highway beyond the curve, beyond the line of trees, the morning began to tremble again. This time it was not 8 engines. It was not 12. It was something much larger. Something building from the distance with the deep rolling force of a storm that had finally chosen where to break. The sound came before the bikes. It rolled over the highway in waves low and heavy, spreading through the morning air, until the gas station windows began to hum. A plastic cup near the trash bin trembled. The loose chain on the back gate tapped against the metal post. Inside the store, a soda cooler rattled, like it was afraid. Eleanor looked toward the road, confused at first, then frightened. She had heard motorcycles before. She had heard them in summer thundering past Morrison's Haven in 2s and 3s. She had heard them outside the diner at midnight, engines ticking as they cooled men laughing too loudly, because the world had taught them softness was dangerous. She had heard them on charity runs, funeral rides, toy drives, storms of chrome and leather moving through small towns like weather with headlights. But this was different. This sound had weight. It did not pass by. It came for her. Around the front of the station, customers stepped away from cars. One man forgot to take the gas nozzle out of his truck. A woman holding coffee back toward the store window, eyes fixed on the road. Vernon stood near the back door with his mouth half open, suddenly looking less like a manager and more like a man who had kicked at a sleeping bear and just heard it breathing. Hawk did not move. He stood with his phone in his hand looking down the highway. Vera gently took the sandwich from Eleanor's shaking fingers before it could fall. Eleanor, she said, breathe. I don't understand. Hawk turned back to her. You don't have to yet. What did you do? I called people who should have been called a long time ago. The first line of motorcycles came around the bend. 12 bikes at the front riding in 2 clean columns. Headlights cut through the pale morning glare. Behind them more appeared. Then more. They kept coming, pouring over the rise like black water. Engines speaking in a language Eleanor's bones remembered. Scout barked once, then backed into Eleanor's knees. She put a hand on his head. "It's all right," she said, though she did not know if she believed it. The lead rider in the new group was an older man on a dark red touring bike. White beard tucked into his jacket, shoulders still wide but bent by weather and grief. His vest was covered in patches so old the stitching had faded. He pulled in beside Hawk's Harley and killed the engine. One by one the others followed. The roar did not stop, it only changed shape. Engines shut off near the pumps, but more arrived from the road. Bikes lined the edge of the lot, then the side lane, then the gravel shoulder beyond the fence. Riders dismounted in silence. Boots hit asphalt. Leather creaked. Helmets came off. No one laughed. No one shouted. No one looked at Eleanor the way people looked at the homeless. They looked at her like they were trying to match the woman in front of them with a story they had been told by men who were now dead. The older rider walked toward Hawk. "How sure are you?" he asked. Hawk handed him the photograph. The man took it with both hands. He stared at it a long time. Eleanor saw his face change. Suspicion, disbelief, pain. He pointed to the young rider with the coffee mug. "That's Preacher." Hawk nodded. The old man swallowed. "And that's Frank." Eleanor's breath caught. "You knew my husband." The old rider looked up. His eyes were wet. "Ma'am, your husband once pulled 3 of us out of a ditch at 2 in the morning and then charged us 95 cents each for coffee because he said free food made fools proud and paying made them family." Eleanor made a small sound. Half laugh, half sob. "That sounds like Frank." The old rider stepped closer, slowly, as if approaching a church altar. "My name's Marcus Cole. Road name's Preacher's son. Not because I was his boy, because I followed him around like one when I was young and stupid." Eleanor stared at him. Behind the wrinkles, behind the beard, behind the years, she found something. A thin young man in a denim vest, sitting in booth 6 with a swollen eye, refusing to say who had hit him. She remembered setting meatloaf in front of him and telling Frank to add gravy because boys who pretended not to be hungry were always the hungriest. "Marcus," she whispered. "Yes, ma'am. You hated onions." A laugh broke out of him so suddenly that several riders turned. "Still do." Eleanor pressed both hands to her mouth. For 3 days, nobody had recognized her as anything but an inconvenience. Now this stranger, this old biker with scarred knuckles and a faded patch, stood in front of her and remembered onions. That was when she started crying. Not loud, just tears sliding down a face too tired to defend itself anymore. Marcus removed his gloves and folded them together in his hands. "I thought you were dead," he said. Eleanor wiped her cheek quickly, embarrassed. "Some days I wasn't sure myself." The words hit the riders harder than she intended. More motorcycles arrived. The station lot was full now. The overflow stretched under the shoulder. Truckers who had planned to leave stayed in their cabs, watching through windshields. A sheriff's deputy drove past, slowly, saw the rows of bikes, and kept going for another quarter-mile before turning around in a gravel driveway. Vernon noticed and seemed to gather courage from the possibility of authority. "Okay," he said, lifting both hands. "This is getting out of control. You can't block my lot." Nobody answered. That made him angrier. "I said you can't block my lot." Marcus turned his head. "Who are you?" "I'm the manager." "No," Marcus stepped forward. "I asked who you are. What kind of man sees Eleanor Morrison starving behind his building and worries about parking spaces?" The question landed hard enough to silence the customers still whispering near the pumps. Vernon's face darkened. "You don't know the situation. I know she fed men who had nothing," Marcus said. "I know she gave Preacher a place to sit when his own brother wouldn't open the door. I know Frank Morrison kept a shotgun under the counter and a Bible beside the register and somehow used both less than the coffee pot. I know this woman remembered every name that walked through her diner." He stepped closer. "And I know you had 3 days." Vernon's mouth worked, but no words came. Hawk placed one hand on Marcus's shoulder. We keep this clean. Marcus nodded, eyes still on Vernon. Clean doesn't mean quiet. By then, nearly 40 riders had arrived, and still the sound kept coming. Eleanor looked from face to face, men with gray beards, women with weathered hands, young riders who could not possibly have known her diner, but had come because someone said family. Some wore patches from other clubs, some wore no colors at all. A few had veterans' pins. One woman had a nurse's badge clipped beside her vest. Another rider held a folded wheelchair he had pulled from a sidecar, waiting without making Eleanor feel watched. That nearly broke her more than hunger. The waiting. They did not grab her. They did not decide for her. They stood there huge and rough and intimidating to everyone except the one person they had come for. A young rider, maybe 25, stepped forward with a paper bag from the store. Vera caught his eye and shook her head. Ass first. He looked embarrassed, then crouched a few feet from Eleanor. Mrs. Morrison, I got soup inside, chicken noodle. It's not great, but it's hot. Is it okay if I bring it over? Eleanor looked at him as though he had handed her a crown. Yes, she said. Thank you. The young man nodded and hurried off. Marcus watched him go, then turned back to Eleanor. You did that. I did what? Taught men like us how to ask before helping. Eleanor shook her head. I just ran a diner. No, Marcus said. You ran a place where broken people could sit down without being studied. Then the deputy's car pulled into the lot, and Vernon's face changed from fear to something worse. Hope. The deputy got out of his cruiser with the careful posture of a man who had expected one problem and found 40 motorcycles instead. He was young, maybe 30, clean haircut, pressed uniform. His hand hovered near his belt for half a second before he realized how still everyone was. Morning, he called. Hawk stepped forward. Morning, deputy. We got a call. Vernon almost ran toward him. Yes, officer, I need these people removed. They're blocking customers, harassing staff, and that woman has been trespassing for days. Eleanor flinched at that word. Trespassing, as if she had broken into the world by still being alive in it. Hawk looked at the deputy. No one's harassing anyone. We stopped to help an elderly woman abandoned behind this station. She wasn't abandoned, Vernon snapped. She's been loitering. Marcus's voice dropped. Careful. The deputy raised a hand. Everybody calm down. He turned to Eleanor. Ma'am, are you okay? Eleanor tried to answer, but the uniform stirred another fear. Dalton had warned her about police, not directly. Dalton never did cruel things directly. He could wrap them in concern. Mom, if you wander off again, they'll put you somewhere. They'll say you're not safe. They won't let you decide anymore. Her mouth went dry. Hawk noticed. He stepped aside, not in front of her, not speaking for her, but close enough that she knew she was not alone. The deputy softened his voice. What's your name? Eleanor Morrison. Do you know where you are? Route 29, Fuel and Food, McLean County, Oklahoma, about 9 miles east of Duncan. The deputy blinked. Do you know what day it is? Friday, October 25th. How long have you been here? Since Tuesday night. Why? The question opened a hole under her. Because my son left me. Because I believed him. Because a mother can recognize betrayal and still search for an excuse that makes it hurt less. She looked down at Scout. The dog leaned against her leg. My son told me to wait, she said. So I waited. The deputy's expression changed. Vernon threw up his hands. She's confused. See, that doesn't make sense. Eleanor lifted her head. For the first time that morning, something stronger than shame moved through her face. It makes perfect sense, she said. If you were the one who was left. No one spoke. The young rider returned with soup, but stopped when he saw the deputy. Vera took it and set it carefully on a clean napkin beside Eleanor. The deputy looked at the bowl. The cracked wall, the riders, then back at Eleanor. Do you have identification? Eleanor's hand went into her purse, then stopped. No. Why not? My son has it. Phone, my son has that too. Money. She looked away. The deputy exhaled slowly. Hawk spoke calm and precise. We have a statement. We have a time frame. We have a possible vehicle. We also have reason to believe there may be surveillance footage from Tuesday night. Vernon's head snapped toward him. Hold on. Hawk looked at him. You have cameras on the back lot. That's none of your business. It became someone's business when an old woman got dumped under one. The deputy turned to Vernon. Do you have cameras? Vernon hesitated too long. Yes, but they don't always work. When did they stop working? Marcus asked. Vernon glared. The deputy's radio crackled. He answered, listened, then looked back at the sea of riders still growing at the edge of the station. How many more are coming? He asked Hawk. Hawk looked toward the highway. The rumble was still there. I don't know. You don't know? Hawk's eyes returned to Eleanor. People remember her. At that moment, the largest wave crested the hill. The road beyond the station filled from shoulder to shoulder with motorcycles. Not speeding, not reckless, moving in formation with a terrible, beautiful patience. Headlights burned in morning haze. Chrome flashed. Flags snapped from a few rear mounts. The sound rolled over the lot like thunder crawling on the ground. Eleanor's hand rose to her mouth. Vernon stepped back until his shoulders hit the wall. The deputy whispered something under his breath. Marcus stood straight up to her. Vera smiled through tears. And Hawk, without taking his eyes off the approaching column, said the words that made Eleanor understand this was no longer just kindness. That should be the rest of them. The motorcycles did not arrive like a mob. That frightened Vernon most. A mob would have shouted, a mob would have given him something to point at, something to condemn, something to tell the deputy when this was over. But this was order. They rolled in 2 by 2, then 4 by 4 when the shoulder widened. Every rider finding a place without being told. They filled the station lot first, then the gravel strip beside the old tire shop, then the empty field across the service road where weeds bent under boots and kickstands. No one blocked the pumps. No one touched a customer. No one raised a fist. They simply arrived. And with every engine that shut off, the silence grew heavier. Eleanor sat with soup untouched in front of her, watching people step off machines that looked too large, too loud, too powerful to have anything to do with her. Men with beards down to their chests, women with silver rings and sunburned faces, veterans with stiff knees, young riders with nervous eyes, old riders who needed a second before swinging a leg over the seat because age had caught them too, just in different places. Some wore Steel Brotherhood patches. Some wore patches from clubs Eleanor did not know. Some wore no colors, but almost all of them had heard the name Mama Ellie. It moved through the lot in whispers. That's her. Preacher's Mama Ellie. My old man talked about that diner. She fed the saints after the flood run. I thought she passed years ago. Eleanor heard pieces, and each one made her feel less real. Not because they were lying, because they remembered a woman she had buried quietly inside herself. A woman with flour on her arms and coffee burns on her fingers. A woman who could carry 6 plates down one arm and still catch a boy stealing sugar packets without making him feel small. A woman who knew which riders wanted booth 6 because it faced the door. Which ones sat with their backs to the wall. Which ones did not like to be touched. And which ones needed a hand on the shoulder even if they pretended they didn't. That woman had been useful. This woman could barely stand. Hawk saw the thought cross her face. Eleanor. She blinked. Yes, you still with us? She tried to smile. There are quite a lot of you to be with. Hawk looked over the lot. More coming. Her fingers tightened around the bowl. Why? The question came out so small. Scout lifted his head. Hawk turned to Marcus. Tell her. Marcus stared at him. Hawk, she needs to know. Marcus looked at Eleanor. For the first time since he arrived, the old rider seemed afraid. Not of Vernon, not of the deputy, not of the day. Afraid of speaking honestly to a woman already wounded enough. He stepped closer and lowered himself onto an overturned milk crate. Do you remember a boy named Eddie? Eleanor closed her eyes. There had been so many boys, so many names. Some came back easily, some had faded at the edges. Eddie, she repeated. Was he the one with the green motorcycle? Marcus smiled faintly. No, that was Robbie. Oh, Robbie owed Frank $12. He owed everybody $12. A few riders laughed softly. Eleanor's brow furrowed. Eddie, thin, red hair, always wore sleeves even in August. Marcus's smile disappeared. That's him. Eleanor opened her eyes. He had a burn on his wrist from his father. The air changed. Even Vernon, who had been whispering urgently to the deputy, went quiet enough to listen. Eleanor's hand moved to her mouth. I wondered. You did more than wonder, Marcus said. You packed him meatloaf every night for 2 weeks and told him it was leftovers, even though everybody knew Frank cooked extra. Then one Friday, when his father came into the diner drunk, Frank came out from behind the counter with that old shotgun, and you stood between them with a coffee pot like you were ready to baptize that man in boiling water. Eleanor looked stunned. I did not. Mama Ellie, you absolutely did. A large woman with gray braids and a patch that read Dove stepped forward. My brother was Eddie. Eleanor turned toward her. Dove's voice shook. He said there were 2 reasons he didn't end up dead before 20. His bike and your diner. Some nights he said the diner mattered more. Eleanor's eyes filled. What happened to him? Cancer. 8 years ago. But he had children, grandchildren, a life. She took a breath. You helped him get to that life. Eleanor looked down, overwhelmed. I just gave him supper, No Dove said. You gave him a place where nobody hit him for eating it. That sentence settled over the riders like a prayer. The deputy stood still near the door, notebook useless in one hand. Hawk pointed toward another rider near the ice machine. Tommy, a thick-set man with a shaved head and reading glasses hanging from his collar, stepped forward. You remember what preacher said about Morrison's Haven? Hawk asked. Tommy nodded. Every saint needs a table before he needs a sermon. Marcus gave a rough laugh. Preacher said that every time someone asked why a motorcycle club kept meeting at a diner with yellow curtains. Eleanor almost corrected him. The curtains had been yellow. He was right. A younger woman stepped forward next. She could not have been older than 35. A toddler's name tattooed across her wrist. My dad was Crowley Banks. Eleanor inhaled. Crowley. The woman nodded. He said you kept a birthday candle under the register. Because he told you once nobody had ever made him a cake, Eleanor remembered immediately. Crowley had been huge, terrifying to customers. Soft with children, hands like hams. He cried when she put a candle in a slice of coconut pie because they had no cake that day. He blew it out too fast, embarrassed. Then hugged Frank so hard Frank complained about his ribs for a week. He was a good man, Eleanor whispered. He became one, the woman said. He said you saw it before he did. Eleanor pressed the napkin to her eyes. Around her, the parking lot had transformed. 10 minutes earlier, it had been a place people used and left. Pumps, trash, diesel fumes, lottery tickets, impatience. Now something sacred had been dragged into daylight and set down between the dumpster and the cinder block wall. And Eleanor was at the center. That frightened her more than being forgotten. When people forget you, you can shrink. When people remember you, you have to stand inside the truth of who you were. Vera touched the soup bowl lightly. Eleanor, you need to eat. I can't. 2 spoonfuls, I'll be sick. Then 1. Eleanor looked at the riders. At Hawk. At Marcus. At Dove. At the young woman whose father once cried over coconut pie. Then she picked up the spoon. No one cheered. No one made a show of it. They gave her the dignity of not turning survival into entertainment. She took 1 spoonful. The soup was too salty, too hot, probably from a machine inside the gas station. It was the best thing she had tasted in 3 days. Scout whined. Eleanor looked down. Oh, hush, I haven't forgotten you. The young rider who had brought the soup opened a second bag and pulled out a can of dog food. I got him covered. Is that okay? Eleanor looked to Hawk as if asking what the rules were now. Hawk shook his head. You don't need permission from me. She turned back to the young rider. Yes. Thank you. He likes to pretend he's brave, but he's just hungry. The young rider crouched and began feeding Scout from a paper tray. Scout attacked the food with such desperate joy that a few people smiled and looked away because even that hurt to watch. The deputy cleared his throat. Mrs. Morrison, I need to ask official questions, but first, do you need medical attention? No, Eleanor said automatically. Vera immediately looked at Hawk. Hawk looked at Eleanor. Eleanor sighed. I dislike hospitals. Most of us do, Vera said. I don't want trouble. Vera's voice softened. Trouble already came. We're trying to make sure it doesn't get to keep you. Eleanor looked at her, then nodded once. The deputy reached for his radio. I'll request EMS. Vernon snapped his head up. EMS for what? She's sitting up. She's talking. Hawk turned slowly. She's 78, hasn't eaten properly in 3 days, has no medication, no ID, no phone, and was abandoned behind your business. I didn't abandon her. No, Marcus said. You just stepped over the evidence. Vernon pointed at him. I've had enough of you. Hawk took one step between them. The deputy raised his voice. That's enough. For a second, the whole lot held its breath. Hawk looked at the deputy, then stepped back. Calm, controlled. Like I said, he told his riders without turning. Clean. The word moved through the group. Clean. Hands dropped. Shoulders loosened. People stepped back half a pace. The deputy noticed. So did Vernon. So did Eleanor. These were not reckless men waiting for violence. These were people restraining themselves because the woman they came for deserved peace more than they wanted revenge. The deputy spoke into his radio requesting medical assistance in a second unit. His eyes kept moving over the crowd. Then a man in a clean gray riding jacket stepped forward from the edge of the lot, removing sunglasses. He did not look like the others. No beard, no patches except a small Steel Brotherhood pin near his collar. He carried a leather folder and had the calm, exhausted face of someone who argued for a living. Hawk looked relieved. Marcus Vale. The man nodded. Sorry I'm late? Court ran over. Marcus Cole snorted. It's not even 9. Judges enjoy ruining breakfast. Marcus Vale approached the deputy and held out a card. Marcus Vale, attorney. I represent the Steel Brotherhood Charitable Association. I also spent 9 years handling elder exploitation cases before I got tired of watching families steal politely. Vernon's color drained. Marcus Vale continued calm as a blade. If Mrs. Morrison was abandoned on this property and if the camera captured evidence related to elder abuse fraud, neglect, or unlawful abandonment, then preserving that footage is urgent. If the manager deletes, alters, loses, or refuses to preserve it, after being notified, that becomes a separate problem. He looked at Vernon, an expensive one. The deputy's posture changed. Mr. Vale, are you saying? I'm saying you should ask him one more time on body camera whether that system records. The deputy looked at Vernon. His body camera sat black and square on his chest. Vernon, the deputy said, does your system record? Vernon swallowed. The back lot went so quiet, Eleanor could hear Scout licking the paper tray. I'd have to check, he said. Marcus Vale smiled without warmth. Then let's check. Vernon did not move. Hawk took one slow step toward him. Not threatening, just present. Behind Hawk, nearly 80 riders stood in silence. Behind them, more headlights glowed on the shoulder. Beside Eleanor, Vera held the water bottle. Marcus Cole held the old photograph. Scout stood with dog food on his snout, looking from face to face. The deputy turned toward the store. Open the office, Vernon. Vernon's hand shook as he reached for his keys. And that was when Eleanor heard it. Not engines, not voices, a ringtone. Thin, familiar, muffled, coming from Vernon's pocket. He looked down too quickly. Hawk saw it. Marcus saw it. The phone rang again. And on the screen before Vernon could turn it away, one name flashed bright enough for everyone closest to read. Dalton Morrison. Vernon did not answer. He stared at the name glowing on the screen as if it had crawled out of his pocket by itself. For one suspended second, nobody moved. The deputy saw it. Marcus Vale saw it. Hawk saw it. But Eleanor felt it before she understood it. Her son's name appearing there in Vernon's hand connected two pieces of the last 3 days with a sickening click. Dalton had not just left her behind a gas station. He had known who would find her. Or worse, he had known who would ignore her. The phone rang again. Vernon's thumb twitched toward the screen. Hawk's voice cut through the air. "Don't," Vernon looked up. "It's my phone, and that's her son." "I don't know that." Eleanor spoke before anyone else could. "Yes, you do." Her own voice surprised her, thin but unbroken. Vernon's face tightened. "Lady, I get calls from customers all day. It's a gas station. At 7 in the morning, it's not—" "From my son," Vernon's eyes flicked to the deputy. "I want a lawyer." Marcus Vale lifted one eyebrow. That escalated quickly. The deputy stepped closer, body camera facing Vernon. "Why is Dalton Morrison calling you?" Vernon swallowed. The phone stopped ringing. Silence flooded back in, but it was no longer empty. It was crowded with everything Vernon wasn't saying. Eleanor looked down at her hands. They trembled again. Not from hunger, from clarity. All morning she'd been trying to protect Dalton in her mind, trying to leave one small door open for an explanation that did not make him cruel. Maybe he panicked. Maybe Clarissa made him. Maybe he thought someone from the shelter would come. Maybe he meant to return and something happened. But Dalton's name in Vernon's phone did not feel like an accident. It felt like a receipt. Scout pressed against her leg. She lowered one hand to him automatically. Hawk noticed her face and moved slightly, putting himself between Eleanor and Vernon without blocking her view. The deputy held out his hand. "Vernon, step inside with me and show me the surveillance system." "I said I want a lawyer. You can call one after we secure possible evidence." "I know my rights." Marcus Vale nodded. "Then you know obstruction is an ugly word." Vernon glared. "You can't threaten me. I'm describing the cliff you're walking toward." Marcus Cole gave a low grunt, almost approval. Another motorcycle rolled into the far field, then another, but nobody looked away from Vernon. The giant sound that had carried the riders here was gone now, replaced by smaller, sharper sounds. Truth being cornered. A key ring shaking, a dog breathing, a woman trying not to cry. Vernon took one step toward the store, then another. The deputy followed. Marcus Vale followed the deputy. Hawk turned to Vera. "Stay with her." Vera nodded, always. Eleanor watched the men disappear through the back door. The second the door closed, the riders began to murmur, but quietly, like people inside a church after a coffin had been carried past. Nobody crowded Eleanor. That careful distance was the first kindness she had been given in days that did not involve food. Marcus Cole still held the photograph. He looked at it, then at her. "You remember the flood run?" Eleanor blinked. "The what?" "Spring of '99. River took out half the East Road. Preacher brought 40 riders through town with supplies. Your diner was the staging point." Eleanor's brow furrowed, then eased. "Oh yes, Frank burned the first 2 trays of biscuits because he was trying to act like he wasn't worried." Marcus smiled. "You fed the whole crew before sunrise. I made eggs. You made eggs, biscuits, gravy pancakes, coffee, and peach cobbler somehow. I had canned peaches. You told Preacher you didn't." He looked too smug. Marcus laughed, and a few riders laughed with him. Eleanor almost smiled. Then it faded. "I had so much energy then," she said. "I used to think if something needed doing, I could just do it. Bake more, work later, stretch the soup, add chairs, make room." Her eyes moved across the lot of leather vests and weathered faces. "And now I couldn't even keep my own son from driving away." Marcus's smile vanished. "Mama Ellie, listen." She looked at him. "When someone steals your chair, it doesn't mean you forgot how to stand." That sentence struck deep. She looked away quickly because believing kind words after years of being reduced to a burden felt dangerous. Inside the station, voices rose. The deputy's voice came first, muffled through the wall. Vernon answered defensive. Marcus Vale said something too calm to hear clearly, which somehow made it worse. Then the back door opened. The deputy stepped out, first holding the small black device in one hand and his radio in the other. Marcus Vale came behind him with his phone pressed to his ear. Vernon followed last. His face was gray. Hawk looked at the deputy. Well, the deputy glanced at Eleanor. There is footage from Tuesday night. Eleanor stopped breathing. Vera's hand settled gently near his shoulder, but did not touch until Eleanor leaned back into it. The deputy continued. A white SUV entered the rear lot at 11:43 p.m. It stayed 4 minutes. Mrs. Morrison exited the passenger side. A man matching Dalton Morrison's appearance got out, spoke to her, then left. The lot went silent. Eleanor closed her eyes. 4 minutes. 78 years of life reduced to 4 minutes behind a gas station. Hawk's voice was low. Did he force her out? The deputy hesitated. Not physically. She stepped out on her own. Vernon seized on it. See? She got out. She wasn't dumped. Eleanor opened her eyes. The riders turned toward Vernon. All of them. Vernon's voice died. Marcus Vale ended his call. She got out because her son told her to wait, he said. That's not consent. That's trust being used as a weapon. The words moved through Eleanor like a blade and a bandage at the same time. Trust being used as a weapon. Yes, that was what had happened. Dalton had not needed to shove her. He knew she would obey the role she had played his entire life. Mother, patient, forgiving, waiting. The deputy looked at Vernon again. There's more. Vernon's shoulders sank. Hawk's eyes narrowed. Footage from Wednesday morning shows Mr. Vernon Bennett speaking with the same white SUV in the front lot. Driver did not exit. They spoke through the window. Vernon then walked behind the building, looked at Mrs. Morrison, and returned inside. Eleanor stared at Vernon. The shame in his face was too late to be useful. You saw him, she said. Vernon rubbed both hands over his mouth. I didn't know the whole situation. You saw my son. He said you were confused. Eleanor flinched. Vernon kept going, words spilling faster as if speed could turn guilt into explanation. He said you'd been wandering. Said the family was handling it. Said not to call anybody because you got agitated around police. He said if I let you sit there, someone would pick you up. Hawk's voice hardened. Someone? Vernon looked at him. He gave me a number. The one that just called Vernon did not answer. That was answer enough. Eleanor's eyes filled, but her face did not collapse this time. Something inside her was changing. Not healing yet. Healing was too clean a word. It was more like a door, swollen shut for years, had finally cracked under pressure. Did he pay you? Marcus Vale asked. Vernon's head snapped up. No. Marcus Vale stared. The deputy stared too. Vernon's mouth tightened. No cash. Marcus Cole's voice came from behind Hawk. That's a careful answer. Marcus Vale stepped closer. What did he give you? Vernon's eyes flicked toward the store office. The deputy noticed. Vernon, it wasn't like that. What did he give you? He said he'd cover the damage. What damage? Hawk asked. Old delivery scrape? Insurance deductible. It was nothing. How much? Marcus Vale asked. Vernon did not answer. How much? Hawk repeated. $500. A sound went through the riders. Not a roar. Disgust. Eleanor looked at him as if she had misheard. My son paid you $500 to leave me back here? Vernon's face twisted. He didn't say it like that. How did he say it? Vernon's mouth opened, but no words came. Eleanor nodded slowly. There it was. The price of her silence had been $500 in a damaged wall. Not even enough to be a grand betrayal. A cheap one. Somehow that hurt more. Vera whispered Eleanor. Eleanor lifted one hand, asking for a moment. She looked at Vernon, and when she spoke, her voice was calm. I made soup once for a man who had robbed a liquor store. Vernon blinked. He came into our diner after midnight, blood on his sleeve. Frank knew. I knew. Everyone knew. I gave him soup because he was shaking so hard he couldn't hold a spoon. The riders listened. He turned himself in the next morning. Years later, he came back with his daughter and told me the soup was the first thing anyone had given him without asking what he deserved. Her voice thinned. I would have given you soup too, Vernon. No one breathed. You didn't have to be good, she said. You only had to not sell me. Vernon looked away. The deputy lowered his eyes for half a second, then spoke into his radio requesting a supervisor in adult protective services. Marcus Vale moved beside Hawk. I've found Dalton's address, he said quietly. Briar Ridge. Nice house, 2 cars. Property records show Eleanor's home sold 6 months ago. Eleanor heard him. My home wasn't sold. Marcus Vale looked at her carefully. What do you mean I didn't sign it? The deputy stopped talking. Marcus Vale went still. Hawk's face changed. Eleanor's hand went to her purse. She fumbled with the clasped fingers' clumsy breath quickening. Vera helped steady the purse but let Eleanor open it herself. Inside, beneath the pharmacy receipt, in an old napkin, Eleanor found a torn seam in the lining. She worked 2 fingers into it and pulled out a folded envelope soft from being carried too long. I kept these. Marcus Vale took the envelope only after she nodded. He opened it. Inside were 3 papers, a bank statement, a county recorder letter, a handwritten note in shaky cursive. Marcus Vale read the first page, then the second. By the third, his expression had gone cold. Eleanor, why were these hidden in your purse lining? Clarissa kept throwing things away. Said old papers made me anxious. So I put important ones where she wouldn't look. Marcus Vale held up the county letter. This says there was a deed transfer filed with your signature. I never signed my house away. Did you sign anything recently? Eleanor nodded slowly. Dalton said they were medical forms for insurance. He covered the page with his hand and showed me where to write my name. Marcus Cole swore under his breath. Hawk turned away for a second, breathing through his nose, like a man physically holding back rage. The deputy stepped closer. Mr. Vale. Marcus Vale's voice was flat. If what she's saying is accurate, we're not just looking at abandonment. We're looking at fraud, financial exploitation, and misrepresented property documents. Eleanor stared at the papers. My house, she whispered. Vera finally touched her shoulder gently. Eleanor did not pull away. It was Frank's house, Eleanor said. He built the back porch, Krug. I told him it leaned, and he said everything worth loving leans a little. Her mouth trembled. They sold my porch. No one answered because the answer was yes. And because sometimes cruelty is too ordinary to sound real when spoken out loud. From the far edge of the lot, a rider called out, Hawk. Everyone turned. A white SUV had just passed slowly on the highway. It did not pull in, not yet. It rolled by the gas station tinted windows, dark brake lights glowing as it slowed near the entrance. Eleanor saw it and went rigid. Scout began to growl. Hawk followed her gaze. Is that him? Eleanor could not speak. The SUV continued past, then turned into the old tire shop lot across the road where dozens of motorcycles were parked. It stopped there for a moment, trapped by the sight of more riders than Dalton Morrison could possibly have expected. The driver's window lowered halfway. A phone lifted inside. Someone was filming. Hawk looked at Marcus Vale. Marcus Vale looked at the deputy. The deputy put one hand near his radio. Marcus Cole stepped beside Eleanor. Vera moved closer. Across the highway, the SUV sat still. Then the door opened, and Dalton Morrison stepped out in a clean blue shirt, holding his mother's phone in one hand, and a smile on his face that did not reach his eyes. And with nearly 80 bikers watching, he called across the road like a good son arriving late to a misunderstanding. Mom, there you are. We've been looking everywhere. Dalton Morrison crossed the road like a man walking onto a stage he believed he owned. That was the first thing Hawk noticed. Not panic, not relief, not the frantic movement of a son who had found his missing mother after 3 days. Dalton adjusted his sleeve before stepping off the curb. He checked traffic. He glanced at the motorcycles. Then he smiled. Clean, practiced, useful. The kind of smile used in bank offices, church hallways, neighborhood meetings. The kind that said, I am reasonable, I am respectable. Whatever you heard about me must be a misunderstanding. Eleanor shrank back before he reached the lot. Small, almost invisible. But Hawk saw it. So did Vera. So did Scout, who planted himself in front of Eleanor and growled so low the sound seemed to come from under the concrete. Dalton lifted both hands as he entered the property. Easy, I'm not here to cause trouble. No one answered. Nearly 80 bikers watched him walk toward the back of the building. Their silence made his smile work harder. Eleanor Dalton said, softening his voice, Mom, you scared us. Eleanor stared at the phone in his hand. Her phone. The red case was cracked near the corner because she had dropped it in the kitchen months earlier. Frank's old photograph was still tucked inside the clear back cover. She had asked Dalton for that phone the first night behind the station, then the second morning, then the second night when she started to understand no one was coming. Now he held it like proof of concern. You have my phone, she said. Dalton glanced down as if he had forgotten. Yes, of course. You left it in the car. Remember, no. You took it. His smile tightened for half a second. Then he looked around at the riders, choosing his audience. She gets confused when she's tired. That's why this has been such a nightmare. Hawk stepped forward. Nightmare for who? Dalton turned to him. And you are Hawk Mercer. That doesn't answer my question. It answers enough. Dalton gave a polite laugh with a sharp edge. All right, Mr. Mercer, I appreciate whatever you think you're doing here, but this is a family matter. Marcus Cole's voice came from behind Hawk. Funny. Looked like a parking lot matter when you left her here. Dalton's eyes flicked toward Marcus, then over the rows of riders. He was measuring them now. Not as people, as risk. I didn't leave her here. The deputy stepped forward. Mr. Morrison. Dalton's posture changed immediately. Respectable citizen mode. Yes, officer. Thank God. I was about to call. My mother has been missing since Tuesday night. The deputy stared. Missing, yes. She wandered off during a stop. I've been searching for her ever since. Eleanor's face folded in pain. Not shock, pain. Because even now, with all these witnesses, Dalton could say it so smoothly that a small wounded part of her still wanted to believe he had only made a terrible mistake. Marcus Vale stepped beside the deputy. Interesting. Then why didn't you file a missing person report? Dalton looked at him. And you are Marcus Vale. Attorney, my wife and I contacted people privately first. Hospitals, shelters, friends. We didn't want to embarrass her. Hawk's jaw moved. Embarrass her. Dalton turned to Eleanor. Mom, this is overwhelming. Come on. Let's get you in the car. Clarissa is worried sick. Eleanor did not move. Dalton extended his hand, the same hand that once reached for hers crossing busy streets. The same hand she had held when he was 5 and feverish and crying because he thought thunder was the sky breaking. The same hand that had signed papers, taken cards, closed doors, and now waited for her to obey. Mom, he said firmer. Scout barked. Dalton flinched. Get that dog away from her. Eleanor's hand dropped to Scout's collar. He stays. Dalton's face hardened. Mother, don't be difficult. The word hit like a slap. Mother, not mom now. Mother. The riders heard it too. A few shifted, boots grinding softly against asphalt. Hawk raised one hand without looking back. Still. Vera leaned close to Eleanor. You don't have to go anywhere you don't want to go. Dalton heard. You need to stop interfering. Vera looked up. She needs medical care. She has medical care. I handle her appointments. Then what medication is she supposed to be taking? Dalton blinked. Vera waited. What dosage? He recovered quickly. I don't have to discuss my mother's private health information with a stranger in a vest. You don't know, Vera said. His eyes flashed. Eleanor looked at him, and a tiny part of the fog he had built around her began to burn off. You told Dr. Patel I refused the new pills. Dalton turned back. Mom, not now. I didn't refuse. That's not what happened. Clarissa said they were too expensive. Mother. She said if I took fewer pills, maybe I'd stop acting like I needed attention. The words escaped before Eleanor seemed ready for them, and the whole lot went still. Dalton's face went red, then pale. That is not true. Eleanor looked down, frightened by her own honesty. But Hawk's voice came low beside her. Keep going, Mama. Dalton snapped toward him. Do not coach her. I'm not coaching her. I'm listening. You should try it. The deputy stepped between them slightly. Mr. Morrison, I need you to answer questions. Dalton exhaled, performing patience. Of course. But first, I'd like to take my mother home. She's clearly been influenced by these people, and she needs rest. She needs IMS, Vera said. She hates hospitals. Eleanor whispered, I do. Dalton pointed gently, almost triumphantly. See, she agrees. Eleanor's fingers tightened in Scout's fur. I hate hospitals, she said. I hate being lied about more. Dalton's mouth closed. For the first time, the smile disappeared completely. Across the road, the passenger door of the white SUV opened. A woman stepped out. Beige coat, gold earrings, hair in a perfect knot. She looked toward the motorcycles with visible disgust, then arranged her face into concern before crossing the road. Oh, Eleanor, she called. Thank God. Eleanor's body reacted before her mind did. Her shoulders curved inward. Vera noticed. Clarissa came straight toward her, but Hawk stepped into the path. Clarissa stopped, offended. Excuse me? She can see you from there, Hawk said. I'm her daughter-in-law. Then you should know she doesn't want you in her face. Dalton moved beside Clarissa. See what I mean, officer? They're intimidating us. The deputy looked at Hawk. Hawk took one deliberate step back, hands visible, observing. Marcus Cole muttered big difference. Clarissa focused on Eleanor. Eleanor, sweetheart, we have been frantic. No, you haven't, Eleanor said. It came out before fear could stop it. Clarissa's eyes sharpened only for a second. Then softness returned. You're exhausted. You don't know what you're saying. Eleanor lifted her head. I know exactly what I'm saying. Clarissa gave a sad little smile to the deputy, as if sharing the burden of managing someone irrational. She's been declining for months. We tried to keep it private because she's proud. Proud. The word sounded obscene coming from Clarissa. This was the woman who had taken Eleanor's wedding ring to clean it, then never returned it. The woman who labeled Eleanor's kitchen drawers because she said old people got anxious without systems. The woman who threw away Frank's shirts while Eleanor was at a doctor appointment because, as she put it, grief clutter was still clutter. Clarissa clasped her hands. Mom, please, let's not do this in front of strangers. Eleanor flinched. Mom. Clarissa only used that word in front of people. Hawk turned slightly toward Marcus Vale. Marcus Vale was already watching Clarissa like he had found the second half of the problem. The deputy said, Mrs. Morrison, we have footage showing Eleanor exited your SUV here Tuesday night. Clarissa's eyes flicked to Dalton. A mistake. Small, but everyone close enough saw it. Dalton answered quickly, yes, because she became agitated. She wanted air. At 11:43 p.m., behind a closed gas station, Marcus Vale asked, It wasn't closed. The back lot was empty. You weren't there. Marcus Vale smiled without humor. Neither were you after 11:47. Dalton's nostrils flared. Clarissa touched his arm, warning him. Then she tried another route. Officer, my mother-in-law has episodes. Last month she said I stole her wedding ring. Eleanor looked at her. You did. Clarissa sighed. See. Eleanor's voice trembled, but she kept speaking. You said you were taking it to be clean. Then you said I misplaced it. Then Dalton said maybe I had hidden it because I was getting paranoid. Dalton looked at the deputy. This is exactly what we're dealing with. Eleanor looked from him to Clarissa. How much did you get for it? Clarissa's face froze. There it was. Not proof, but a crack. Hawk saw Marcus Vale notice it. Marcus Vale wrote something in his phone. The deputy's radio crackled. EMS was 3 minutes out. Adult Protective Services had been notified. Dalton heard and changed tactics. Fine, he said. Have her checked. We have nothing to hide. But after that, she comes home. No, Eleanor said. The word was small, but it stopped him. Dalton turned slowly. What did you say? Eleanor swallowed. Scout leaned into her leg. Vera stayed close. Hawk stood just ahead. Marcus Cole held the photograph like a relic. Nearly 80 riders waited. Eleanor took a breath that seemed to come from the bottom of her life. I said no. Dalton's voice dropped. Mother, you don't understand what you're doing. I think I finally do. Clarissa laughed softly. Panic under it. Where exactly do you think you're going to go with them? She gestured at the riders. That's not a plan, Eleanor. That's a spectacle. Eleanor looked across the lot. At the men who remembered onions. At the woman whose brother survived long enough to have grandchildren. At the young rider feeding Scout. At Vera, who asked before touching her. At Hawk, who had not once called her confused. Then Eleanor looked back at Clarissa. They came when my son didn't. That landed. Even Dalton had no answer. The ambulance turned into the station with lights flashing but no siren. The riders parted before it stopped, opening a clear path with a smoothness that made the paramedics pause. 2 EMTs stepped out. Vera met them halfway, giving details quickly. Female 78, likely dehydration, poor intake for approximately 3 days, possible missed medication, emotionally distressed, but oriented ×4. Dalton stepped forward. I am her son. I'll ride with her. Eleanor's head snapped up. No, the EMT looked from Dalton to Eleanor. Ma'am, who do you want with you? Dalton gave a tight smile. She's overwhelmed. I can answer. Ask her, Hawk said. The EMT did. Eleanor, who do you want with you? Eleanor's eyes moved to Vera. If you don't mind. Vera's face softened. I don't mind. Dalton's control cracked. This is ridiculous. She doesn't even know you. Eleanor looked at her son. I know. She asked permission. That silenced him. The EMTs brought the stretcher, but Eleanor stared at it with open humiliation. I can walk, she said. Vera nodded. Then we walk. The EMT hesitated. Ma'am, for safety. She said she can walk, Hawk said. Stay close. Don't take it from her. Eleanor placed one hand on the wall and tried to stand. Her knees shook for a terrifying second. Everyone leaned forward. No one touched her. Not until she reached. She held out her hand and Vera took it. Then Marcus Cole offered his arm. Eleanor rested her fingers lightly on his sleeve. The riders began to move. Not toward Dalton, not toward the ambulance. They moved away from each other, forming 2 lines across the back lot. A path from the dirty cinder block wall to the waiting ambulance. Eleanor looked at it in confusion. Helmets came off one by one. Men who looked like they had fought the world and lost pieces of themselves doing it stood bareheaded in the morning sun. Women with hard eyes lowered their chins. Young riders stood straighter. Old riders swallowed tears. No one clapped. No one spoke. It was not applause. It was honor. Eleanor's lips parted. I can't. Hawk stood near the beginning of the path. Yes, you can. I'm filthy. No, he said. You're found. Eleanor's face crumpled, but she took one step, then another. Scout tried to follow, and the young rider scooped him up carefully. He's coming too, Eleanor said at once. Already knew that the young rider said. The first steps were slow, painfully slow. Her shoe dragged because of the split sole. Her hand trembled on Vera's arm. She could feel Dalton staring from behind. Clarissa's anger like heat. The EMTs waiting. The deputy watching. Vernon near the doorway with his face hollowed out by guilt. But the further she walked, the less she felt like a woman being removed from behind a gas station, and the more she felt like someone being escorted out of a battlefield. Halfway down the path, a rider whispered, Thank you, Mama Ellie. Then another. You fed my dad. You helped my brother. Preacher never forgot you. Neither did we. Eleanor stopped. Vera steadied her. Eleanor looked down the two lines, and for the first time all morning, she did not try to hide her tears. Dalton pushed forward. That's enough, he snapped. This is manipulation. Mom, get in my car now. The path did not break. Hawk turned slowly. So did Marcus. So did nearly 80 riders. Dalton stopped as if he had walked into a wall. The deputy stepped in front of him. Mr. Morrison, stay back. She's my mother. Eleanor turned, still standing between the rows of bikers. Her voice shook, but it carried. I was your mother when you left me here. Dalton's face twisted. For the first time, the mask slipped completely. You have no idea what you cost us, he hissed. Clarissa grabbed his arm. Too late. The words were already out. The deputy's body camera was still recording. Marcus Vale's phone was recording too. Every rider heard it. Eleanor heard it most of all. And somehow, instead of breaking her, it straightened her. Dalton realized his mistake. Mom, I didn't mean. Yes, Eleanor said. You did. A second police car arrived, then a dark county vehicle. Adult Protective Services. Clarissa whispered something sharp to Dalton. Marcus Vale stepped closer to Hawk and spoke low. I got the county recorder on the phone. They're pulling the deed file now. Hawk did not take his eyes off Dalton. Marcus Vale looked at Eleanor. The notary on the house transfer is Clarissa's cousin. Eleanor's hand went cold on Vera's arm. Clarissa turned white. Dalton heard enough. He backed one step toward the SUV. The deputy noticed. Mr. Morrison, don't go anywhere. Dalton looked at his mother. The riders, the cameras, the county car. Then his hand tightened around Eleanor's phone, and before anyone could stop him, he threw it hard toward the storm drain. The phone hit the edge of the storm drain with a sharp plastic crack. For half a second, it balanced there. Red case, black screen. Frank's old photograph still tucked inside the clear back. Eleanor made a sound that was not quite a scream and not quite a word. Then the phone slipped. Not all the way. One corner caught between the iron bars hanging over the dark drainage channel below. Everyone froze. Dalton stood with his arms still extended, breathing hard. The mask of the worried son torn clean off his face. The deputy moved first. Do not move. Dalton blinked as if remembering where he was. It slipped. No one believed him. Scout lunged forward, barking so violently the young rider holding him nearly lost his grip. Hawk's hand shot out, stopping Marcus before the old rider could move. Clean Hawk said, Marcus's face was red with fury. He just tried to destroy her phone. I saw. Then let me know. The word cracked across the lot. Not loud. Final. Marcus stopped, chest heaving. Hawk did not look away from Dalton. We are not giving him the story he wants. That sentence saved the whole morning. Because Dalton wanted chaos now. You could see it in his eyes. He had lost the respectable son act. He had lost control of the footage, the crowd, the deputy, the narrative. His only chance was to make the bikers look like animals, to make himself look surrounded, threatened, forced to defend his family from a leather-clad mob. But they did not move. Nearly 80 riders stood still, while the phone hung over the drain like a tiny red heart about to fall into darkness. The deputy stepped between Dalton and the grate. Hands where I can see them. Dalton's face twisted. You're kidding. Hands. I'm the one being threatened. Hands, Mr. Morrison. Clarissa rushed to his side. Officer, this is absurd. My husband is upset. That phone belongs to his mother and she... Then he shouldn't have thrown it, Marcus Vale said. Clarissa turned on him. You people are enjoying this. Marcus Vale stayed calm. No, Mrs. Morrison. Enjoyment feels different. Vera kept one arm near Eleanor, who was still standing between the two rows, eyes locked on the storm drain. My phone, Eleanor whispered. It's not gone, Vera said. Look at me, it's not gone. But Frank's picture, we'll get it. The young rider holding Scout stepped forward. I can reach it. Hawk looked at him. The kid froze. He was maybe 24, sandy hair, grease stain on his jaw, vest so new it had not learned the shape of his shoulders. "What's your name, Nate?" "You steady, Nate?" "Yes, sir, you touch nothing but the case. You hand it straight to the deputy." "Understood." "Yes, sir," the deputy nodded. Nate lowered Scout into Vera's care, then dropped flat on his stomach beside the drain. His arms slid carefully between the bars. Everyone watched him reach into that narrow space. The phone shifted. "Eleanor, stop breathing." "Easy," Hawk said. Nate's fingers closed around the red case. The phone slipped another inch. A gasp moved through the riders. Nate pressed his cheek against asphalt shoulders, straining, and hooked 2 fingers under the case. "Got it," he whispered. He pulled slowly. The phone scraped against iron. Then it came free. Eleanor covered her mouth with both hands. Nate stood and gave the phone to the deputy like it was evidence from a murder scene, which in a way it was. Not the murder of a body, the murder of a life carefully erased. The screen was cracked but lit. The old ringtone had stopped. A notification glowed across the top. "Clarissa Morrison. Don't say anything until we know what they have." The deputy read it. So did Marcus Vale. Clarissa saw their faces and went pale. Dalton lunged forward. "That's private property." The deputy stepped back, phone in hand. "It's evidence now. My mother can give it to me." Eleanor's voice came from behind him. "No." Stronger this time. Dalton turned. Eleanor stood with Vera on one side and Marcus Cole on the other. Coat stained, hair loose, body still weak enough that the EMTs hovered nearby. But there was something different in her eyes. Not certainty, not yet. The beginning of it. The first dangerous spark of a woman remembering she had survived more than her son knew. "That is my phone," she said. Dalton softened too quickly. "Mom, please. You don't understand how this looks. I understand exactly how it looks." "No, you don't. These people are using you." Eleanor looked at the rows of riders, the quiet faces, the bare heads, the dog tucked in Vera's arm. Then back at her son. "They asked before touching my shoulder," she said. "You sold my house while covering the paper with your hand." Dalton's face hardened. "I did what I had to do." The sentence hung there. Clarissa closed her eyes briefly. Marcus Vale lifted his phone, still recording. The deputy's body camera faced Dalton straight on. Hawk's voice was quiet. "Say that again." Dalton recoiled from his own words. "I mean for her care." Eleanor's mouth trembled. "My care was behind a dumpster." Dalton took a step toward her. The deputy blocked him. "Stay back. She's my mother." "That is not a permission slip," Vera said. Dalton pointed at her. "You don't know anything about this family." Vera's eyes flashed. "I know she has a pulse of 98, dry lips, low blood sugar symptoms, likely missed medication, and bruising on her wrist where someone grabbed her hard enough to leave fingers." Dalton's eyes flicked to Eleanor's sleeve. Eleanor pulled it down. Hawk saw that too. He looked at Vera. Vera nodded grimly. The EMT stepped in. "Ma'am, we really need to evaluate you inside the ambulance." Eleanor nodded, but she did not move yet. She looked at the phone in the deputy's hand. "I know the code." Everyone turned. Dalton's face changed. Clarissa whispered, "Eleanor, don't." And that was how they knew there was something inside. The deputy walked toward Eleanor, slowly. "Ma'am, you don't have to unlock it right now. I want to." Marcus Vale stepped in gently. "Eleanor, once you unlock it, there may be things you're not ready to see." She looked at him with tired wisdom. "Mr. Vale, I spent 3 nights behind a gas station hoping my son had a better reason than the one I already knew. I think I'm ready." No one argued. The deputy held out the phone. Eleanor reached, but her fingers shook too badly. Vera placed one hand under Eleanor's wrist, steadying without guiding. The passcode screen appeared. "What's the code?" the deputy asked. Eleanor looked at Dalton. He shook his head once. A warning. She saw it. This time she did not obey. "Frank's birthday, 042241. The deputy typed it in. The phone opened. Dalton swore under his breath. Clarissa stepped back as if the asphalt had moved. On the home screen, 26 missed calls. Not from Dalton, not from Clarissa, from Dr. Patel, from Bryer County Pharmacy, from Mrs. Donnelly at church, from a contact named Linda, APS. Eleanor stared. Linda, she whispered. Marcus Vale leaned closer. Who's Linda? The social worker at the clinic. She gave me her number. Dalton said she retired. Marcus Vale's jaw tightened. The deputy opened recent messages after Eleanor nodded. The first thread was from Clarissa. 4 words sent Wednesday morning. Is she still there? The reply from Eleanor's phone had gone out 2 minutes later. Yes, stop panicking. Eleanor looked at the screen. I didn't write that. The deputy scrolled. Another message later Wednesday. Clarissa Vernon says she won't leave. Eleanor's phone, good. If she wanders into town, this gets messy. Eleanor swayed. Vera caught her. The EMT stepped closer. Eleanor, sit down. But Eleanor kept her eyes on the screen. Clarissa had gone completely still. Dalton stared at the phone with the expression of a man watching a locked door open from the inside. The deputy scrolled again. Thursday morning, Clarissa. What if someone feeds her Eleanor's phone, then she looks abandoned? We need her confused, not rescued. A sound came from the riders. This time Hawk did not need to raise a hand. They controlled themselves. Barely, Marcus Cole turned away and pressed both fists to the top of his head. Dove cursed under her breath. Nate looked sick. Eleanor stared at the words. We need her confused, not rescued. For 3 days she had wondered whether she was losing her mind. Now she knew someone had been trying to make sure she did. Clarissa's polished face cracked. You don't understand the context. Marcus Vale turned toward her. Please explain the context of needing a starving elderly woman to look confused. Clarissa's mouth opened. No answer came. Dalton found his voice. She was becoming impossible. The deputy looked at him. Mr. Morrison. No, you don't get it. Dalton's smooth edges shredded. None of you get it. You see an old woman crying and suddenly everyone's a hero. You don't see the bills. You don't see the calls. You don't see your whole life getting swallowed by someone who can't remember where she put a spoon. Eleanor flinched. Hawk stepped forward. The deputy's hand rose. Don't he warn Dalton? But Dalton could not stop now. That was the thing about people who lied too long. Once truth found a crack, it did not leak politely. It flooded. She had a house she wasn't using right. Money she didn't understand. Rooms full of junk. My father's old garbage, that diner photo, those stupid aprons. Every time we tried to move forward, she cried about the past. Eleanor whispered, that was my life. Dalton looked at her, and what about mine? The question came like a slap, not because it was fair, because he believed it. What about my mortgage, my daughter's tuition, Clarissa's business? You think love pays assisted living? Memories pay property tax, Marcus Vale said quietly. So you took the house. Dalton turned on him. I managed assets. You forged documents. I had power of attorney. Eleanor lifted her head. No, you didn't. Dalton froze. Everyone looked at her. Eleanor's voice was shaking but clear. Frank and I made papers after his stroke. Linda helped us. If I ever couldn't decide, it was supposed to be my sister Grace first, then Pastor Jim. Not Dalton. Clarissa's head snapped toward Dalton. Even she had not known that. Marcus Vale stared at Eleanor. Do you have copies? Eleanor looked down at her purse. In the lining she whispered, the other side. Vera helped open the purse. Eleanor slid her fingers into the torn fabric on the opposite side and pulled out another folded packet wrapped in wax paper and tied with thread. Old, carefully hidden, protected the way poor people protect the few documents that stand between them and being erased. She handed it to Marcus Vale. He opened it. The first page made his eyes narrow. The second made his entire face harden. Well, he said quietly. Hawk looked at him. Marcus Vale lifted the paper. Durable power of attorney executed 8 years ago. Names Grace Bellamy as first agent, James Holloway as alternate. He looked up. Dalton Morrison is not listed. Dalton's face drained. Eleanor blinked. I told you. The three words were not loud, but they broke something. Not in her, in him. Because Dalton could survive bikers accusing him. He could survive Vernon talking. He could survive even the phone if he could claim stress, misunderstanding, caregiver exhaustion. But he could not survive his mother being right. Clarissa backed away. You told me you had authority. Dalton shot her a look. Shut up. The whole lot heard it. Clarissa's face went white with rage. Oh, now I should shut up, Clarissa Dalton warned. No. You said she signed everything. You said the house was clean. You said there was no sister because Grace was dead. Eleanor looked up sharply. Grace isn't dead. Clarissa turned toward her, and for the first time all morning, she looked frightened of Eleanor. Not disgusted by her. Frightened. I didn't know. Eleanor stared at her daughter-in-law. Where is my ring? Clarissa's eyes flicked down just once to her beige coat pocket. Eleanor saw it. So did Vera. So did Dove. Clarissa put a hand over the pocket too late. Eleanor's voice became very quiet. Give it back. Clarissa swallowed. Eleanor, give me my ring. Dalton snapped. Don't say another word. Clarissa looked at him, then at the deputy, then at 80 bikers, then at Eleanor standing in a torn coat with more dignity than anyone in that parking lot. Slowly, Clarissa reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small velvet pouch. Eleanor made a sound like all the air had been knocked from her body. Clarissa opened the pouch and tipped the ring into her palm. A thin gold wedding band. Scratched. Plain. Frank's initials engraved inside because they had never been able to afford anything fancy. Eleanor reached with both hands. Clarissa hesitated. Vera's voice dropped. Don't. Clarissa placed the ring in Eleanor's palm. Eleanor closed her fingers around it and held it to her chest. For several seconds, the whole world narrowed to that small circle of gold, not valuable to anyone else, priceless to her. The deputy turned to Dalton. Mr. Morrison, place your hands behind your back. Dalton stared. For what attempted destruction of evidence? Suspected elder abandonment. Suspected financial exploitation. Suspected fraud. And we'll sort the rest at the station. Clarissa whispered. Dalton. Dalton took one step back, then another. Hawk noticed before the deputy did. He's going to run. Dalton bolted for the SUV, not toward Eleanor, not toward his wife, toward escape. The deputy shouted. Marcus moved. Hawk moved faster, but it was not Hawk who stopped him. It was Scout. The dog tore out of Vera's arms, launched across the asphalt, and clamped his teeth into the cuff of Dalton's expensive pants. Dalton stumbled, twisted, and hit the ground hard. He rolled onto his back, cursing, trying to kick the starving dog who had shared Eleanor's last cracker. That was when every rider in the lot took one step forward. Just one. The sound of 80 boots hitting asphalt at the same time ended the struggle. Dalton froze. The deputy cuffed him. Scout backed away, tail high, victorious, trembling. Eleanor looked at the dog through tears. My brave boy. A woman in a navy jacket stepped out of the county vehicle carrying a clipboard and wearing the expression of someone who had seen too many families do terrible things quietly. She introduced herself as Denise Carter. Then she looked at Eleanor. The ambulance, the ring in her hand, the riders forming an honor path, the cracked phone, the old documents, Dalton in cuffs, Clarissa shaking beside the SUV, Vernon standing near the back door like a man wishing he could disappear into the wall. Denise took a slow breath. Mrs. Morrison, I'm here to make sure you're safe. Eleanor looked at her, then at Hawk, then at Vera, then at the two lines of riders still waiting for her to finish the walk she had started. I don't want to disappear, Eleanor said. Denise's face softened. Then we start there. The EMTs guided Eleanor the last steps to the ambulance. But this time she did not look at the ground. She held Frank's ring in one hand and Vera's arm with the other. Scout trotted beside her, limping a little, proud as a soldier. At the ambulance doors, Eleanor stopped. She turned back toward the gas station wall where she had spent the night. The cracker crumbs were still there. The place where she had sat was still dark from damp concrete. Her purse had left a small, clean mark in the dust. It looked impossible that a human being could sit there for 3 days and the world could keep moving. Hawk came near. Not too close, just near. Eleanor looked up at him. "Why would all of you come for me?" Hawk's face changed. He looked past her at the riders, at Marcus, at Dove, at every person who had answered a call before breakfast, because a forgotten woman once fed forgotten people. Then he looked back at Eleanor. "Because you came for us first." Eleanor closed her eyes, and for the first time since Tuesday night, she let someone help her sit down. But just as the EMT reached for the ambulance door, Marcus Vale's phone rang. He looked at the screen. His expression sharpened. Hawk Marcus Vale put the call on speaker. A woman's voice came through, older, shaking, furious. "This is Grace Bellamy. I just got your message. Where is my sister? And why did Dalton tell me she died 6 months ago?" The ambulance door stayed open. For a moment, nobody understood what the voice had said. Then Eleanor whispered, "Grace." The voice broke. "Ellie." Not Eleanor. Not Mrs. Morrison. Not confused. Not burdened. Ellie. The name of a girl who once ran barefoot through summer grass with her little sister behind her. The name Eleanor had not heard since Dalton told her Grace had stopped calling because she was tired of drama. Grace began to cry like someone who had been grieving for 6 months and had just learned the coffin was empty. "He told me you died," Grace said. "He said you had a stroke. He said there was no funeral because you didn't want fuss. He said Frank's ashes were spread with yours near the old diner." Eleanor's hand flew to her chest. "No. Frank is at Briar Memorial. Plot 22, under the maple." The deputy turned slowly toward Dalton in the police car. Dalton looked at the ground. There are lies people tell to steal money. There are lies people tell to escape shame. And then there are lies so intimate they do not just hide the victim. They bury her while she is still breathing. Grace kept talking. She had sent cards that came back. She had driven to Eleanor's old house and found strangers living there. She had been told everything was finished. Final, sealed. Marcus Vale leaned toward the phone. "Miss Bellamy, did Dalton ever tell you?" "Well, Eleanor signed over power of attorney." "Oh, no," Grace said. "Because she didn't. Ellie named me years ago. She made me promise nobody would put her somewhere she couldn't see the sky." Eleanor sobbed once, softly. Dalton called out from the police car before they put him inside. "Mom, please. I made mistakes, but I'm your son." The word pulled Eleanor's eyes to him before she could stop it. He knew it would. That was the cruelty of blood. "Some voices have keys even after they have robbed the house. You were my little boy," Eleanor whispered. Dalton nodded quickly. "I still am." Eleanor looked down at Frank's ring in her palm. She slid it onto her finger. It fit loose, but it stayed. "Yes," she said, "you are my son." Dalton's shoulders sagged. Then Eleanor finished. "And that is why you knew exactly how long I would wait. You knew I would make excuses for you. You knew I would be too ashamed to ask strangers for help. You knew I would sit behind this building and tell myself my boy was coming back. You didn't leave me because you forgot I was your mother, Dalton. You left me because you remembered." This time he had no answer. The ambulance took Eleanor to the hospital with Vera beside her and Scout at her feet. Hawk, Marcus, and a smaller group escorted them in 2 lines. Not roaring, not showing off. Escorting. 6 months later, Morrison's Haven reopened on a bright April morning with paint still drying on the window frames. Eleanor stood at the grill with flour on her hands and Grace at the register. 40 motorcycles lined the gravel lot. The smell of coffee and bacon moved through the air. Scout slept under the counter with a new collar that read his name. On the wall hung the old photograph. Frank and Eleanor, young, together. surrounded by people who remembered what kindness tasted like when served at a table where no one kept score. A bruised teenage boy walked in nervous. Eleanor wiped her hands on her apron and smiled. "Sit anywhere, sweetheart. Breakfast is on the house." Hawk sat at the counter with coffee steaming in front of him. "You good, Mama Ellie." Eleanor looked around the diner, at Grace laughing with a customer, at the young rider Nate working the griddle, at the morning sun pouring through clean windows. She looked at her wedding ring, still on her finger, still hers. "I'm useful," she said. "That's better than good." And somewhere in the back booth, Scout lifted his head. The boy sat down. Eleanor brought him eggs and toast and a glass of orange juice. The bell above the door chimed. Another rider walked in, then another. Outside, the highway hummed with traffic. People passing by who would never know that 6 months earlier, behind a gas station 9 miles east, a woman had been forgotten and then remembered. Not because she was loud, not because she demanded it, but because she had fed people when they were hungry, and when she needed feeding, they came. That is how the world turns. Slowly, with small kindnesses that do not rot, with tables that remember names, with coffee poured at midnight, with sons who fail and mothers who survive them anyway. Eleanor Morrison lived 4 more years. She was 82 when she passed, surrounded by Grace, Vera, Hawk, Marcus, in a room full of riders who had driven through the night to say goodbye. Scout was there too, gray around the muzzle, lying at the foot of her hospital bed. Her last words were not about Dalton, who served 8 years and never wrote. They were about Frank, about the crooked porch, about everything worth loving, leaning a little. They buried her beside him under the maple tree at Brer Memorial. 200 motorcycles followed the hearse. The service lasted 3 hours because everyone had a story. Not about what she did, about how she made them feel when they walked through her door. Morrison's Haven is still open. Grace runs it now with help from the Steel Brotherhood. On the wall beside Frank's photograph is a new one. Eleanor at 80, standing in front of the rebuilt diner with Scout smiling like a woman who had been lost and then found and then chose every single day after to stay. The sign above the door still reads Morrison's Haven, but the riders call it Mama Ellie's. And on Friday mornings when the lot fills with chrome and leather and the smell of coffee cuts through October cold, you can still hear them say it. "Thank you, Mama Ellie, for the table, for the coffee, for remembering our names when the world forgot we had them."